the man of the day, that is Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, just to speak to us a little bit about some of the rationale behind the budget. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Now, of course, you decided not to raise personal income tax. You decided also not to raise the road levy and the fuel levy, pardon me, and also the road accident fund levy. This is great relief for South Africans who are already grappling, but what was the rationale behind that decision?
Let me just say a couple of things. We've had a good revenue arising from the commodity prices. Secondly, South Africans have had difficult times. If I've got to give revenue, I had to put this revenue into support the South Africans and give them space to have money in their pockets by not increasing taxes.
Indeed. So, of course, you also mentioned this 15 billion rand that will go towards the SME loan guarantee scheme, which is great for small businesses. How is that going to be effected, and most importantly, when? And why such a relatively small quantum, given the impact that SMEs should have on the economy?
There's another 5 billion. The total quantum is 20 billion. Mind you, it's an experimental thing this year. If you can see a massive take-up and a massive improvement in business, we'll put more.
Now, you threatened in the midterm budget last year to get tough with SOEs, and you've pretty much outlined that in today's budget. But just give us the mechanics of how it's going to be worked out, which SOEs survive and which don't.
What I've said, but tough love, you will see in this budget, other than ESCOM, I've not made provision for anyone. I've then said anybody will queue and will be treated on its merits. They will have to demonstrate capabilities and a willingness to transform and a willingness to take the institution to self-sufficiency. They must give me that road trajectory before I can listen.
Okay. So one of the things that you've also stated is that National Treasury is hoping to reach a primary surplus by the fiscal year 2023 to 2024.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just around the corner.
Yeah.
How so?
Yes.
How so?
Yeah, look, we see the projection in revenues as a result of the performance of the economy. For instance, we've revised the economic growth from 1.8 to 0.1, which means that growth is likely to give us some more revenue, which we can be able to sustain the economy growing, the fiscus going forward.
Indeed. But you know, it's interesting that part of the reason why you've done well in the kitty this time around has been largely because of the mining sector and the commodity boom. But that doesn't necessarily translate to how the general broader economy has done.
If you look at the speech, there were also performance in manufacturing and other sectors, but largely the bigger portion was for mining, which means the economy as a whole is beginning to tick up. That's why we could see more increase on personal income tax, better revenue on VAT. So all of that combined, it reflects that it's an impact of the economy recovery.
Now, the important thing, of course, is infrastructure, and basically that is the linchpin of the President Ramaphosa's whole kind of existence or policy, right? And you've talked about applying some 17 billion rand over the medium-term expenditure framework over the next 3 years or so. But of course, that's working in partnership with the private sector. Just elaborate for us a little bit on how that's going to work.
Let me just say, first and foremost, we're sitting state-owned enterprises and in government with an amount of about 812 billion rand for infrastructure. Now, we're saying in addition to that, we're bringing the private sector. That 17 billion is an amount we're going to be using to do a couple of things. First, to generate pipeline and bring in private sector to invest.
And then what about the issue of corruption? You know, we've had the state capture report come out. South Africans are still very worried about the fact that people put their hands in the kitty who shouldn't. And money that's allocated to really important strategic projects doesn't get spent as it should. are the apparatus in place to ensure that all these wonderful plans that you have, with all these figures that you've attached to them, are actually delivered?
First, I've said there, we will assist the corruption fighting institutions. We'll put money into them to deal with everybody who's affected. They must not say they don't have the resources. They must deal with that. That's the first point. But moving forward, we're building systems where we'll make sure that we evaluate every project for value for money. That's another point that I've said there.
Minister, over the medium term, can we afford the basic income grant?
Look, it depends at what level, right? Depends at what level and what do we rationalize. If you look at all of these programs that were extended public works, community-based project, all of these projects, if you combine them, they can give you a figure. I'm not saying we can afford, but already we're putting money in the hands of people, but in an uncoordinated way.
Indeed. And then lastly, the EFF is here. They are protesting about the way that government raises funds. You raise funds in different ways as National Treasury. And one of the ways is to go to international institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. They say that these institutions actually help to mold your policy and you lose your sovereignty to a certain degree. Please remind South Africans of why it's a policy to approach these institutions as a way of raising funds.
Yeah, let me just say, this year, the year that we're finishing, we're supposed to raise 630 billion rand. Right? 630 billion rand. In the next year, we'll raise 484 billion rand because we've reduced the deficit substantially. Now, when you do that, all of those people you're borrowing money from will have their own conditions. So the 11 billion out of 630 is nothing, right? Out of 630 billion. So that's the first point. The second point, the World Bank has put on its website the agreement. There are no conditionalities which impact on our sovereignty. It's an ideology. Treasury officials that are working there are not politicians. What they are looking for is money that can sustain our debt strategy. That is how cheap they can be able to borrow. If they get money cheap from the World Bank, they'll get it.
And just speaking to that, the last thing, you have indicated that you're going to be bringing down the level of debt that you're going to be taking. You're going to be taking out less debt. So your borrowing requirement is coming down this year and next year. Does that mean that you're well on track to achieving the goals that you want to in terms of our debt to GDP ratio?
Yes. You can see at the end we're ending up with a 75% debt to GDP ratio. That's what we want, which we think is a sustainable level of debt.
Super. Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to leave it there.
Thank you.
That was the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, speaking to us here at SABC.